Good morning, everyone. We are going to wait a couple more minutes just for a couple more people to join, and then we will kick off. Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, where we will be discussing the state of ePayables in 2017. A few housekeeping items to kick off. If you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A box, and we will try and answer them at the end of the presentation if we have time. If we run out of time, we will just address the questions afterwards. Another thing is we will be sending out the recording on Friday, so please feel free to share that with colleagues if you think that they would find this interesting. And today we have Art Sarno, who is our Product Marketing Director at Kofax, and Andrew Bartolini, who's the Chief Research Officer at Ardent Partners. Andrew, would you like to kick off with a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, and hello and good day to everybody. I am the Chief Research Officer at Ardent Partners. I've spent about 20 years in this industry. I started on the technology side, but for the last 12 years I've been an analyst focused on identifying the strategies, processes, and technologies that drive best-in-class performance in both the procurement and accounts payable functions of the enterprise. And very pleased to be with all of you today.
Product Marketing Director Art Sarno here for Kofax. I focus on financial process automation, and this includes any of our solutions that address procure to pay, order to cash, or record to report. So today we're excited to focus in on the accounts payable automation component of financial process automation. So just to start off, a little bit about Kofax, just to give you some context, because many of you probably know that we are now an independent company, wholly owned, and our headquarters have remained in Irvine for a number of years. We have 1,600 employees in 30 countries. We have 1,300 partners that work with us in 70 countries, over 25,000 customers, and our 2016 revenue was tracking at the value you see there, $625 million. The focus of the company is based on four major, I would call them themes or value propositions. Financial process automation is one that is focused primarily on any of the solutions that we have, including our Process Director for SAP, our MarkView product for Oracle, our AP automation solutions for all other ERPs, as well as any of those processes that you find in the P2P or order-to-cash environment. This includes, obviously, requisitioning, invoicing, sales order processing, any of those activities. Another major opportunity for us is robotic process automation. This is based on our Kapow product, and this addresses the mitigation of manual, repetitive, rule-based tasks. We also have digital transformation, customer onboarding solutions, and historically our core competency is in the area of multi-channel capture.
So a little bit about Ardent Partners, right? So we're a Boston-based research and advisory firm that focuses on supply management, right? So we look at the source-to-settle process. and really try to focus in on, what are the primary drivers that drive business value and accelerate organizational transformation within the procurement and finance functions of an enterprise. We published two types of research. The first is what we're going to be talking about today, and that's research to help business decision makers understand industry best practices and how to improve performance. The second type of research that we produce is focused on the technology landscape and really designed to help business decision makers, folks in AP who are making technology investment decisions, identify the best fit solutions for their specific budget and requirements. But we've got a great presentation set for you today. It's based in part upon our annual State of the Market AP report, and we're going to go through many of the key findings there, and Art is going to sort of intersperse some slides that really sort of build upon a lot of the findings in the report, and really also offer Kofax's perspective on the AP market in general. Now, just a little bit of background, right? So, we at ARDENT Partners have conducted more market research in the AP space than any other analyst firm in the industry over the past decade. The report, our process is a rigorous process that's been developed over years, spent researching the supply management market. And I really consider this report to be part of an ongoing dialogue that myself and my team have had with AP and finance leaders for more than a decade. The report itself, and I'm sure that Kofax will make the report available to you, examines the general competencies and capabilities of AP organizations today and highlights the management strategies and tactics that AP leaders use to get the most from their teams. It's also, we present a comprehensive industry-wide view into what is happening in the world of AP, and it captures the experience, performance, perspective, and intentions of 191 AP finance and treasury executives. I'll share a little bit about the demographics, right, so that you understand there's a fair amount of data that I'm going to be talking to, and the slides I think are downloadable right now, or at least will be made available to you. So, just to at a high level, first there were almost 200 respondents, and these are all practitioners, right? So any consultants or solution provider, people who are not actually working within a business enterprise, that data was eliminated. But what you see is that there's a very, very senior level response with exactly 50% coming from the director level or higher. The vast majority worked in AP. From a company size and region perspective, right, the data does tilt towards the larger enterprise, which we would describe as companies with revenues greater than $1 billion annually. And the data does tilt towards North America and the EMEA markets, as you can see here. From an industry perspective, I think one of the great things about AP is that there's great commonality across industry, and 25 industries are represented within the study. And so now, to start off, we're going to look at the continued evolution of the AP function and look at the top priorities for AP leaders today and discuss how AP really does serve as a convergence point for cash, supplier, and data management, right? That's really the major theme of this report, right? AP really does sit at the hub of, valuable business processes, valuable business information, and valuable business relationships. And, we believe that, AP leaders have an opportunity to take advantage of this position and really leverage that position to the benefit of the larger organization, but also leverage that position to make the case for an AP transformation. Right, so, still in 2017, right, I think, when you look at businesses, there are typically three major pressures that are being felt across the entire enterprise, right? There's globalization, clearly there's been an uptick in the general speed of business, and there's heightened competition, right? So the opportunities for success in a globalized marketplace are greater than ever before, but are generally only available to those enterprises that have the necessary strategy, resources, and expertise to execute well and with precision, right? So, the question is, right, so how does AP fit into all of this, right? And Really, the starting point for the new era of AP begins with a common concern for this unit, and that's perception, right? So what we have seen over the decade plus in our research is that, many AP organizations, and certainly not all of them, have begun to take strides out of the back office and moved more towards the front lines, right? The top performing AP groups, and we'll talk about what that group, we call them the best in class, they really are making a difference today. And the number of those teams that are receiving recognition as a source of value continues to grow, right? As you can see on this chart, 56%. So now more than half of all business enterprises perceive the AP function as either very or exceptionally valuable to their organization's operations. And this number is notably higher than in recent years, and it shows that AP is well positioned for greater things. Now coming along with that, right, so for AP to make itself over and spark a successful transformation attempt, it needs to expand beyond the basics of the function and begin to augment the more strategic activity to which it is already linked. Invoice processing, payment management, and data collection are critical pieces of AP, but alone they won't be enough to propel AP to the next level of performance, right? We believe that AP must expand its duties, and as you see here, the majority of today's AP functions have some strategic role in either the selection of P2P technologies and or the day-to-day management of these systems, right? And if I were to go, rewind a decade ago, this is a pretty dramatic shift in the level of collaboration that now exists between AP and procurement. And I'll use that as one primary example, but in 2017, the two groups are more frequently partners in developing a shared technology strategy that can work to the benefit of both groups. But, other aspects, right, the ability to impact enterprise cash management and corporate liquidity, the ability to impact relationships with suppliers who are increasingly important to, your business's bottom line performance, all sit as opportunities within AP. And, these numbers continue to grow as we start to think about, the ongoing transformation of AP. Now, while AP as a function continues to transform, there are some hurdles that exist, and clearly one of those is that AP departments continue to face time, cost, and effectiveness challenges, right? Our research shows that the average enterprise receives 58% of its invoices in a manual format, and so that would include paper, PDF, email, snail mail, or fax. Now, the remainder, the 42%, are received in electronic format, and so that would be e-invoice or PO Flip, EDI, XML, or web portal delivery of invoices. And as we'll see, AP's top priority today is still, on the next slide, is to reduce invoice processing costs. Right, the overall percentage of invoices that are received in a manual format is still too high. Right, and so at a higher level recommendation, and we have recommendations at the end, but AP departments would be wise to put in place mechanisms that convert manual invoices into an electronic format, right, so that the data can be captured and processed in a more efficient manner. And by doing so, will allow them to move away from the tactical and focus on the strategic, right? And so, as we see here, what are AP's top priorities in 2017? Today, AP leaders still continue to balance their traditional priorities with those that place them on the path ahead, right? You have to be able to walk before you can run. As you see in the current figure, the most traditional of all priorities still strikes the modern-day AP function the hardest, right? And that's, reducing costs, right? And that's still a top priority for, nearly two-thirds of all AP teams. And this is the focus within the world of AP to maintain its core goal, right? Ensure invoices are not only captured and reconciled, but also effectively processed and paid. I think it's interesting to note that AP's other top priorities are the ones that really start to push beyond the basics and really present the future of the AP function, right? 51% are prioritizing the link between P2P processes and associated automated systems, right? Again, from our perspective, the P2P cycle represents an opportunity for businesses to derive greater value from tasks that help the company run at its most basic level. Right. Our new research suggests that the AP function is taking a much more active role in facilitating the links between P2P processes and P2P systems and P2P organizations, right? AP groups are not only boosting the strategic value of the phases underneath the model, they're also promoting a full cycle of real-time intelligence and functional alignment that can impact the overall enterprise. Right? So the AP industry as a whole is steadily pushing itself higher in the strategic hierarchy of the enterprise, and they're doing this by capitalizing on its ability to impact and enhance cash management, supplier management, and real-time business intelligence. And so, with that, we're going to sort of segue into the next generation of accounts payable. And in this section, we're going to highlight the role that technology has in the AP transformation journey. And we'll look at how innovation is paving a path for this new face of AP. And we're going to start with Art and let him cover the AP automation segment.
Thank you, Andrew. I want to clarify a definition for everyone on the call because sometimes there's confusion about what we mean by accounts payable automation versus the actual AP application. And in general, the goal of AP automation is to provide an invoice that is ready to be paid, whatever that takes. And that's a very complex process. You're dealing with lots of languages, lots of local issues, tax issues, line matching issues, approval issues. But the end goal of that process, and this is typically not well covered by any of the AP applications. So if you have SAP ECC or S4HANA or Oracle EBS or JD Edwards or PeopleSoft or Infor M3 or Dynamics, this capture and hygiene activity that it goes on with the invoice is not very well covered. And of course the goal is to streamline the whole process. And of course, this results, as Andrew said, in a dramatic reduction of cost. It helps in the cash management because you have visibility to transactions in flight as well as those that are posted for payment. It allows you to get some introspection to your suppliers and in general strengthens the whole internal control issue around the process. So just to create an overview here of context, the AP automation process in general can be looked at in this processing flow diagrams. Most customers follow a similar process. Some of the details will change, but the most critical part, of course, is the capture and the transformation component, whether it's email, paper, EDI, XML, fax, or manual entry, or a form or a check request. These invoices must be validated and approved and ultimately entered into a core system where the initial validation is performed by data entry, and the invoices that don't relate to a pre-existing PO have to be routed for coding, and the invoices are typically routed through some sort of an approval process, often to multiple business units based on some really complex business rules. And then the invoices are sent to the ERP where they undergo the final validation and any initial workflow has to be done, and finally they're put into a ready-to-pay state, at which point they're ready to be paid. So that is the process. So you might think of the ERP as picking up in this context, providing lots of context for validation. Obviously, when the invoice comes in, we need to look at the vendor, we need to look at the company, we need to look at the PO, and finally, when it goes into the payment approval queue, it's ready for the ERP to go through and generate all of the AP standard reporting and processes that are done to execute payment. And supporting that, of course, there's supplier master data. There's got to be an end-to-end analytics process, which I'm going to share with you because I think through analytics, you get a real insight to the capability of the automation process and what kind of reporting it can generate to help support some of the initiatives that AP might have. And of course, there's a repository that is used for archiving and retention and those kinds of things. So in the next slide, I kind of have an overview that I've created of what we think are the key requisites for an AP automation solution. And starting in the top left, multi-channel capture obviously is needed, and we talked a little bit about that, and proud to say that Kofax has the leading capture solution in the market today with our solutions, and it's been that way for a number of years. The workflows for AP automation, these tend to be best practice. They deal with things like approval and routing. How do you do a check request? How do you handle blanket POs? How do you implement a process for invoice approval? All those kinds of things are addressed in the AP automation, and they have to be extendable by the user to address some unique requirements. Of course, you have to have integration to an ERP, and in some cases, we have customers that want to apply the same automation rules across multiple ERPs, the option to have a portal, whether it's a vendor portal like an Ariba from a third party, or whether it's a portal that is provided to your vendors for self-service and registration. And then, as I said, the end-to-end analytics. And underlying that, of course, are major capabilities around search, process management, content management, and overall integration in general with the third-party applications. So this gives you a good flavor for what we consider the fundamental requirements.
Right. And to really to just build on, Art's point here, right, an AP department's ability to drive process standardization and general efficiencies across the entire operation has been a defining characteristic of best-in-class performance for the past decade. But, as you can see here, the objectives of today's AP departments continue to grow and expand in both scope and drive, right? The technology really does provide the core, right? It's the foundation upon which you can build, right? It provides the intelligence that is needed to, better understand your spend. It provides, the efficiencies that are needed to allow your teams to focus on more strategic aspects of the AP process. And, our research indicates that there are several factors that are essential for today's AP executives and professionals to, on this great new journey, right? And so, it's not just systems in and of themselves, but smarter systems that can offer new and innovative functionality and really begin to minimize, human interaction, right? To move towards a more touchless AP environment, to move towards an environment of smart invoicing that eliminates exceptions before they can arise. Art just mentioned the importance of deeper and more agile analytics, right? And, in the world of big data, and, the world is becoming much more data-driven, right? And there, having the systems in place that can process that information and begin to, either point organizations directionally towards best practices or identify opportunities for improvement become, very fundamental. They're no longer competitive advantages. Organizations that put their weight behind efforts to become more agile in nature are the ones that are going to benefit most down the line, right? And, we talked about all kinds of intelligence, process intelligence, the importance of metrics. Art, is really going to continue here with that discussion.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, to support a smart systems approach, of course, we need to have some KPIs or key performance indicators that the system is interacting with. And here is a typical dashboard that we've implemented that provides some status data. So on the left side, one can take a look at the invoices that are in flight in the ERP, ready to be paid, or in process through the multi-channel capture activities. Then on the right, we've set up some alerts that look at the workload load by user. These are thresholds that have been set, and that one indicates that there's an activity there that has gone beyond the threshold, or whatever the number is, a 2. And then one can drill down on the supporting transactions for all of those. The workflow queues, these are tasks that are waiting for people to act on that have exceeded the invoice threshold in the queue. Past due invoices, errors, duplicates, and some information on the quality and value of the extraction. So that might have been set up as a value, some kind of a confidence level that might have been exceeded during the actual data extraction component that one might want to take a look at to identify, say, worst case false positives, for example, which we'll look at later. Here's another way of implementing it. This happens to use the new Fiori tile. I want to kind of show off that we have implemented it within our SAP solution. And this is the new user experience interface that SAP has introduced across all of its products. And, of course, the other example I used was just standard HTML. And in this case, you see the same kind of data, average days not posted, invoices in status, invoices in error, invoices in workflow that can be presented in a different way using a different metaphor. So this is another, but again, keep in mind that the underlying AP automation system has to be producing these metrics for these tools to pick up. So whether you're using Tableau or Click or any of those products. It is the AP automation system, the robustness of that to be able to drive these metrics. Another thing that we have introduced is what we would call, as Andrew mentioned, intelligent processing. So we provide the end user with a holistic view of the process. So this is a standard AP automation process, and each of those blocks contains an activity, and the numbers in the blocks represent the number of transactions that are in the activity, and they can be drilled down for further review and introspection to gain some insight. And this can be set up to match the current AP process, automation process that the customer is using, and a very useful tool to get quick insight into the process. And another even more powerful tool is what we would call process path inspection, better known as a swim lane for some of you probably. And what you see here are 4 columns in this example, and at the top, the number of invoices that are participating in each of those task flows that are below, in the first case 5, and the colors have a specific meaning. The colors tell us, for example, if the invoice is the correct transition. So if the color is gray, the invoice has gone through a correct transition from a work item to the next queue in the workflow. If it's orange, it means that it's a correct transition, but it may have skipped a step. Useful information to know if you see a pattern, maybe one of those steps is less useful in the context to become a standard process. In red would be a diversion, an incorrect transition. So from this process path inspection, you can gain some insight relative to the happy state of the invoice, where you expect it to go, and where it actually happened. So these 2 tools, collectively, the process path and the process flow, provide a whole new dimension of insight into the whole AP automation process. And you notice it goes all the way from scan, we know what scan stations are being used, who's been working on them, all the way to the end, and you just see a partial diagram here to where we post the transaction for payment.
Right. And I think Art makes a great point, right, of the importance of operational performance metrics, right? You know, Art, we spend a lot of time, you know, talking about the AP process in general, and we have a framework that we utilize to help organizations better understand the distinct tasks and activities that happen within the major phases of AP. Visibility into performance, both at the department level and at the staff level, allow you to establish best practices. They allow you to improve performance and set baseline expectations for staff, and you know, begin to better manage your team as a whole. You know, none of that can occur in a fully manual environment, right? And so what I'm showing you here today, which is you know, the technology adoption as it exists in the market today, and you know, the clear big takeaway is that, you know, a fully automated AP operation is much less commonplace than it should be, right? We see the percentage of manual invoices coming in. You know, we're going to look at the costs of processing invoices and the times that are taken to process invoices, and these are real costs that are borne by the organization, the larger enterprise, and they inhibit or constrain AP from getting into these other exciting areas that I talked about. Now, let's just look at a couple of the technologies here, right? So automated data capture and extraction technology, you know, continues to be the most popular, right? Organizations, you know, when they think about AP transformation, tend to take a linear approach to how they think about this transformation. And, you know, the automated data capture and extraction technologies, right, scan and capture, you know, is one of the most traditional components of the successful AP function, right? Even smaller organizations, you know, this type of automation is a boon to transfer the key segments of information from paper-based invoices, which again are still a majority in the marketplace today, transform that information into, you know, on-demand data, which can then be fed into a process flow and to a larger financial suite. You know, we have started to see a rise on the payment side as well. And, you know, interestingly, you know, one of the larger trends that we have seen, you know, within AP and within the larger P2P process is that organizations are starting to think holistically, sort of soup to nuts, about the source to settle process. But, you know, the key takeaway here is that AP organizations, we're talking in many ways in the report about sort of the next level of performance and the strategic opportunities. But, groundwork has to be set in place that enables you to become efficient and effective just within doing the AP process, right? You have to, be more than competent in invoice processing and in payment processing before you can begin to tackle some of the larger opportunities. But those larger opportunities oftentimes are the key to making a successful case for investment in AP automation. Now, we have seen an extraordinary amount of innovation over the last couple of years within ePayables. So we use the term ePayables frequently or interchangeably with AP automation. We have started to see technologies that exist in other parts of the consumer world and other parts of the business world becoming more integrated and more integral to AP operations, and certainly, innovation is it's a wonderfully powerful word, and it's a very broad concept, right? Innovation can be complex and innovation can be simple. What we have seen here is, the AP leaders who have participated in our survey, where are the elements of innovation that they see as being most impactful to their performance in the near term? And so we look at RPA, right, something that, is starting to take hold within financial operations more broadly. We look at, agile reporting dashboards. We start to look at AI and machine learning and cognitive, right, machines starting to get smarter. Whether that's at the scan and capture level or whether that is, in process routing, right? Systems taking data, making better sense of it, and augmenting the abilities and, augmenting the abilities is probably the best way to say it, of your staff, right? It's not necessarily replacing staff, but it's doing things that, humans aren't equipped and able to do. And certainly at the top, right? And I think, a key consideration for any organization that's starting to think about transforming their AP organizations today is a greenfield opportunity, and that's mobile, right? We live in a world now where people are, on the go. You're somewhat tied to your smart device or your phone, and the ability to streamline processes and leverage mobile technology, remains the top innovation that AP leaders believe will impact their function over the next few years.
For those of you that are interested in how RPA can enhance even the AP automation process in areas like supplier onboarding, price checking, spend analytics, that kind of thing. We have some webinars in the Kofax website, public website. You can go in and look under the RPA category, and there should be some real-time on-demand webinars that we've done in that area. But in this case, I'd just like to point out what we're seeing, is an incremental migration, and a lot of companies have not yet even implemented mobile approval for nomadic or, remote users. And we see more and more of this. And what you see here is a number of invoices that need to be approved, the ability to actually look at the invoice dynamically with a message for an activity or an action, and then a third action to be able to approve or send it back to the sender or reject the invoice dynamically. And these are actionable type links. They're not just, one-way directional messages. The user is able to examine the invoice and even look at additional data from the phone, which is, the tool of choice for most of these people that are working remotely to be able to approve the invoice.
Great. So now we're going to segue into a look at, the best-in-class AP function, right? We're going to look at the performance and operational benchmark statistics of these of the industry in general to start, right? So that you can compare and contrast how you're doing today with the average AP organization. But then we focus in on this group of top performers, right? The top 20% of all AP organizations. And we compare and contrast them to all of the others, right? The other 80%. And then we begin to analyze and understand, well, what are the things that the best in class are doing or not doing? What are the technologies they're leveraging? How have they organized their departments? What capabilities do they have? What are the competitive differentiators that enable a best-in-class performance? And, it's really the goal and discussion of there is that, for those of you listening in today, if you're not performing at that level, right? I mean, these are best practices in the industry as sort of borne out through the data, and things that could and should be mimicked and replicated. Now we'll start with the average AP organization, right? So these are the benchmark statistics that represent the typical AP organization. And, I think it's important to note that the measurement of key performance metrics is an important part of understanding any business function, especially AP. Now, the benchmarks included in this table, represent a pretty broad range of AP performance in 2017 and should be leveraged as milestones as you're beginning or, continuing your AP journey. I think there's a few key insights that can be extracted from the statistics on this table, and sort of first and foremost is that the average organization spends just over $12 to process an invoice, which in 2017, right, should spark a level of focus, frankly, right, for organizations that are processing thousands of invoices a month or tens of thousands of invoices a month. The ability to shave a few dollars off of that cost, has a dramatic impact on the organization and can have an impact on the bottom line. Taking slightly more than 10 days for a single invoice to be processed, AP departments are, losing considerable time in the overall invoice processing scheme. They may also be failing to capitalize on early payment discounts that are offered by key suppliers. The invoice exception rate, right, at, nearly 1 in 5 of all invoices coming in are flagged for exceptions, right? And this is one of the causes of the higher cost, right? I mean, there's no doubt that the AP function in many ways, one of the primary duties it has is to clear exceptions and to do it in an efficient manner. When you're doing this in a manual world, right, it becomes very hard to identify those problem suppliers, right? There's sort of the Pareto rule that, there's a smaller group of suppliers that are accounting for the vast majority of your exceptions. And your ability to do root cause analysis in a fully manual environment is very difficult, right? You end up solving the same problem over and over and over again. If you have visibility into your operational metrics, if you have visibility as to where those exceptions are coming from, you can apply, standard, best practices to resolve them and ensure that they don't happen as they move forward. Straight-through processing remains a goal for nearly all AP organizations, and about a quarter of invoices today are processed straight through. Part of that is getting your suppliers enabled, right, and getting them to submit their invoices electronically. And, these numbers all continue to improve year over year, right? A decade ago, the cost to process an invoice was about $20. And it used to take organizations about 20 days to process an invoice. They used to call it the old 20/20 rule. The numbers continue to improve, but opportunities to build upon and improve upon these numbers continues to exist, right? And very clearly here, the best in class are a clear example of what an AP organization can do from a performance standpoint on this table, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how they're impacting the business more broadly. Just to be clear for everyone here, and for those of you that are interested, definitely recommend that you get the report from Kofax. In this study, we defined best-in-class performance as the 20% of enterprises with the lowest average invoice processing costs and the shortest average invoice process cycle times. Now, these top-performing enterprises have taken their AP operations to the next level, frequently by leveraging technology to streamline the AP process, make it more efficient, and then enable more strategic activities to carry out, right? These high-performing organizations have significant performance advantages when compared to the rest of the marketplace. And I don't need to do the side-by-side, but these are pretty dramatic savings, right? If you could shave $13 off the cost of your invoices, right, you've made your business case. If you can, collapse the time that it takes to process a single invoice to that amount of time, right, you're making significant impact, right? And when you have visibility, well, so technology, is frequently needed to get to that level of performance. But once you have the visibility into invoice status, you can begin to engage with Treasury and begin to help them develop a more strategic process for how and when you pay suppliers. And that has very significant impact on cash positions and the bottom line and liquidity as well. So huge opportunities that the best in class are tapping into that remain large opportunities for the rest. Now, let's look at some capabilities, right? And so, if we look at some core competencies, this represents the benefits of relying on legacy capabilities for day-to-day operations within the AP function. And, what we're doing here again is comparing and contrasting the best in class as represented in the blue with the all others category, right? That's the other 80% of the marketplace. And, what we see is clearly standardized AP processes ensure that rigorous, consistent steps are followed throughout the entire AP process. And this helps to avoid invoice exceptions, bloated costs, extended approval times, and a general lack of financial visibility. Right, best in class clearly ahead there. Clearly ahead when it comes to matching as well. These capabilities can greatly reduce invoice exceptions and allow AP professionals to enable superior control of the invoice process. Now, best in class enterprises are 2.1 times, more than twice than likely than all other organizations to process invoices in a straight-through manner, right? So without touch, right? Sort of one of the desired end goals, right? And then measuring key metrics, right? I mean, Art and I have delivered several webinars on the importance of understanding your metrics both from an operational standpoint and from a performance standpoint. If you don't have visibility into those metrics, you're unable to set a baseline performance. And if you're unable to set a baseline performance, it's very hard to improve upon it, right? So core AP capabilities. Sort of side by side with that, right? And still today, a large part of the best-in-class AP story is their investment in technology, and not only their investment in the technology and having it deployed on site, but their ability to drive compliance through usage of it, right? So technology has long been a key determinant in the ultimate success of the modern business, right? Those enterprises that choose to eschew the paths of innovation are often left behind. Those that embrace automation and next-generation solutions are the ones that can thrive in an increasingly dynamic and fast-paced business world, right? I spend a lot of time talking about the importance of organizational agility, on the procurement side, on the AP side, on the cash management and treasury side. When you have technologies in place, right, that provide visibility that can be shared with other key stakeholders, whether it's, line of business and understanding the relationships that they have, whether it's procurement, understanding the spend that is with their different suppliers and understanding supplier performance at the invoicing level and at the compliance level, hugely important. And again, from a cash management perspective, we see tremendous opportunities for Treasury for AP to get engaged with Treasury to help them make smarter decisions. When you look at your company's revenues, and then you look at the amount of money that is spent with suppliers, it's a significant percentage of your enterprise dollars that are flowing out to suppliers. And in many organizations still today, there's no real process or defined strategic approach to how and when suppliers are paid. Often it's sort of a first in, first out basis. And, if you don't have these technologies in place, AP's not in a position to engage Treasury, and Treasury won't have the visibility to begin to make smarter decisions. So huge opportunities, right? And, again, a lot of this starts with the visibility, and the visibility we're showing here is the best-in-class visibility. We didn't do it side by side, but the numbers are stark in the difference, right? There are several key factors that play into the ultimate transformation of the contemporary AP function. But there's one area that we really do believe can serve as its tipping point, and that's intelligence, right? The business world today is driven by data and the insights, foresight, and execution that are enabled by that data. AP sits in this enviable position today, right, with its hand on some of the most valuable information related to corporate finances and enterprise purchasing. Our research has shown that AP sits, really at this hub of, of financial intelligence, and, there's an extraordinary amount of value that can be unlocked when you start to attain this level of visibility, right? This gives you the platform and the standing to engage the other business functions. Now, most AP organizations today are still, not at this level, obviously, and they struggle to get backing. They struggle to get the engagement that the best in class have started to do. And so, we always recommend that you engage the stakeholders that can benefit from this visibility: procurement, treasury, the business, suppliers too, and utilize the strength overall of those relationships and the importance of the data, the underlying data, to each of those constituencies, very powerful, right? For the average AP staffer today, they spend somewhere between a quarter and a third of their time responding to inquiries. Those can be internal inquiries, or those could be external inquiries from the supplier. Now, in a manual environment, that's a time-consuming process. And the information that you're ultimately going to be returning back to the person who made the inquiry, is not going to be timely. And it very well likely not be that accurate, right? So, start to think about the importance of all of these different components: standardizing your processes, building your capabilities out, leveraging technology, getting the visibility, and then sharing and extending that visibility to those that can drive even more value out of it. Now, intelligence overall is important, and visibility into team performance and operational metrics remains also a critical area to lower the cost of invoice processing, to speed the time in which they're approved, and to move towards a more straight-through environment. So, pass that back to Art.
Thank you, Andrew. Of course, in order to get the insight that one needs and to start looking at areas where you can take out costs, we usually start at the beginning. And the system, in this case, is tracking data entry activity. There you're looking at the number of transactions by different users, the color code, over time. The activity around coding that is tracked, because these are where some real labor costs are taking place, way up in the front, or what we call the first mile of the business activity. I don't show them here, but there are also graphs that one needs around the validation activity. We'll look at that a little later. And things like segregation of duty and compliance, such as suspending an invoice. In other words, I just got tired of working on it and let it go. Or there was a duplicate. Or delegation of authority was incorrect, where someone was doing an approval or coding that wasn't authorized in the chain. In the next graph, we see a slide that depicts the integrity of the extraction. And in this case, we're looking at true positives. In other words, they're straight through, and this is a goal. We try to get the straight through processing. We think a good number to reach for straight through processing is in the 70-80% range. There are companies that will claim they can do 99% extraction, and depending on the mix of the invoicing and the number of geographies that are contained and the churn of the vendor community, 70-75% is a good goal. And of course, the one you want to avoid is the red, which is the false positive, which basically tells you at the field level where you're getting false positives. So the thing you see on the left are all of the fields that are being extracted from the invoice and the percent of confidence, and this is done through a threshold associated with each of those colors. Again, true positive, true negative, false positive, false negative. Then we also take a look at throughput. We track the touches. Was there zero touch? Was there a one-touch process or a multi-touch? So the invoice touch graph will display that information, talk about the number of manual actions that are being intertwined in the system, and this provides information for improving the quality of the invoice by dialoguing with the supplier, or the quality of the whole process in the coding extraction phase. This is a very interesting chart. This deals with matching activity, the result of the extraction matching with the PO lines in the ERP system. The view shows how the system validates these invoice lines. We can use this to define matching performance. And of course, below that, we can look at a list of suppliers that have the low matching efficiency to determine if the issue is relative to the format or our matching logic or the capture process. So there's a good example of providing supplier feedback across the process at the lowest level of detail, at the invoice level and at the line level. All of this valuable import. And of course, using the Fiori metaphor, we can have all kinds of drill downs that will depict the invoices in a workflow, where they are and for what vendor they're associated with. So the green slice there would represent a particular vendor that we have a lot of invoices in process. That could be because of volume. It could be because of the quality of the transaction. And of course, we can drill down and do more and more inspection on these transactions dynamically. And these are all real time.
Right, and the importance of real time here, maybe nothing's more important to an organization than cash, right? Cash is the lifeblood of an organization. Cash is king, and cash remains king, but managing it well, I like to say is aces. And so, we look at, we've talked about the future of the AP function and the direction that it's going. And, we've benchmarked thousands of AP organizations over more than a decade. We believe very strongly that the future of the AP function hinges on its ability to not only transform itself into a more strategic unit, but to serve as a convergence point for greater things. And perhaps nothing is, from an opportunity standpoint, larger than the ability to impact cash management. And it starts with the visibility and the reports that a system can generate that allows AP to share information, right? Not necessarily drive the vendor disbursement schedule, but to engage Treasury and begin to understand, when payments can and should be made, and this impacts, corporate strategy at a very, very high level. And what we see here are some of the strategies that best-in-class organizations are utilizing to impact cash management, right? And it's, it starts with the systems, and it starts with the visibility, and then it starts with the engagement with the different stakeholders, and in this case, Treasury. And, again, as you start to think about it, right, you've got to be able to walk before you, crawl, walk, run. Organizations are doing this today. So, if your organization is not thinking about its ability to impact cash and to impact business relationships and to share business intelligence throughout the enterprise, right, now's the time to start doing so, or you risk being left significantly behind.
In terms of cash management, and as Andrew said, this is the key to relegating AP from a transactional-based environment to a profit center. Obviously, there are supporting graphs that can help in the management of that. And here you see an example of the number of invoices that are in process, in flight, where they are in the process, an average across that, and also the discounting opportunity that can be played historically, whether they're taken or they're missed. And of course, all of these metrics are drillable so that one could go down and look at the supporting invoices that support each of these transactions. In the other one, you have an area here where we are doing some cash management for discount opportunity, showing invoices coming due and discounts coming due that display the quantity and the currency amount of all invoices within a specific filter value. And then finally, when you start to look at payment performance, we can analyze the data that would provide suppliers the information they need to make informed decisions about the payment practice that we have, whether it's historical, and of course the time zones can be variable, and the view can be drilled down to look at the supporting invoices. And the suppliers supporting these can be reviewed as well. So these are all important metrics. And again, the automation system needs to be able to provide these in order to support it. So it's a very important requirement that you should put on all of the automation solutions that you're looking at. And then, of course, you want to track supplier performance for better vetting and better interaction or ranking. And here we have a report that shows the top suppliers by spend, by volume of invoices, and by missed discounts. And this, again, especially if you had a supplier portal, mitigates some of those areas that Andrew was talking about. We know that at least 25% of the time is spent in just talking to suppliers and communicating with them and helping the suppliers understand where their transactions are and when they're going to get paid. And on our side, we're always looking to optimize our discount opportunities.
Right, and you know, I'll pause here before we go and talk about a few recommendations. Right, I'm really struck by that last series of charts that Art just showed you. Right, so right now we're in a pretty positive business environment with low interest rates, but it was not so long ago that there was an extraordinary global recession and a cash crunch that hit most organizations. The ability to enable financial agility in a higher interest rate environment or environments where, you know, sales are much tougher, right? These are the kinds of things that can impact lines of credit, your cost of capital. I mean, these are huge bottom line impact type things, right? It may not seem as important today given the, you know, sort of the where we are in the business cycle, but these business cycles don't continue forever, right? And so, you know, start thinking today about what happens in the next downturn, and are you going to be equipped to provide that type of information to the people that are making key financial decisions to your organization? You know, if you're not, you should be thinking about these types of things, right? And you know, whether by design or necessity, the responsibilities of the typical AP department in 2017 continue to expand and evolve, right? And that really does mirror the broader convergence of processes and functions and collaboration that's occurring in business today. As more responsibility converges under the AP operation, the function gains the opportunity to broaden its influence and make a larger impact. But these near-term opportunities and those that lie ahead cannot come at the expense of today, right? AP and other finance leaders of all stripes and maturities have immediate opportunities to improve operations within their own departments. As such, you have to balance the business's need for agility, collaboration, and innovation with the discipline and focus required to extract more value from the function by stretching the limits of the organizations and positioning it for ultimate success. Now, the report has a pretty lengthy set of recommendations. Sort of attempted to streamline them here a little bit more, but we think it's very important for you to be thinking about the longer-term strategy of goals, objectives, organizational structure of the AP operation, right? As you start to look at the evolving needs of the business, the skill sets that exist within the AP organization necessarily should be changing with those needs. Again, you know, we've focused on, in the report in great detail, we've touched upon cash pretty significantly. We've hit upon suppliers and intelligence. You know, the next generation level of AP value really, you know, sits at the convergence of those areas. You know, new technologies and new innovations are coming to the market much faster. So we think it's important for AP organizations, even those that are fully automated, to be aware of the trends and to be aware of the market leadership and to be aware of, you know, those new innovations that are going to improve performance and increase agility. You know, we've talked about the convergence points. You know, if you don't feel like your organization is well positioned today as a hub, you know, begin to build the relationships with those other stakeholders that we've mentioned, particularly procurement, particularly treasury. And you know, as you start to think about AP, you know, put an AP transformation into the larger context of a procure to pay transformation, and that would include payments. And so we do have a few minutes left here, so I'm going to pass it over to Ann. I guess I've got my contact info here. I'm sure that Art can get his shared as well. But you know, Ann, any questions for us?
Yeah, we have a couple. The first one, Andrew, is for you. Can you discuss the importance of KPIs and how the best-in-class use them?
Sure. Right. So, I mean, you know, we showed some performance metrics. Art showed, you know, some operational reports and reporting metrics, right? to improve upon anything, you have to establish baselines, right? And so, the best in class have standardized their processes. They understand, what's going on within their operations, but they're also tracking how they're doing, right? They're identifying the outliers from a staff performance standpoint, and they're course correcting them, right? So they're using those metrics as a baseline to build upon, and to set targets for improvement, right? If you don't have visibility into your metrics, you're flying blind. And the best in class are a great example. When you look at how they outperform across every area, I think it's a fantastic example of the importance of metrics.
Great, thank you. And actually, the second one is for you as well. From a P2P perspective, how do you see procurement and AP collaborating in the future?
Yeah, so a decade ago, when we talked about P2P, from the procurement perspective, there really was no second P, or maybe 15 years ago. Over time, organizations have understood that they need to be rowing together in the same boat. And so collaboration, whether that's around the business process or around shared systems, really has been the trend that we're starting to see more and more of today, right? It's very difficult, right? When you think about your strategic suppliers, right? You don't want to be the customer, the high-cost problem customer, right? When capacity, runs tight, you want to be the customer of choice. And when a supplier is dealing with 4 or 5 or 6 different constituencies within the business to follow along what's essentially a single transaction or a single business process, that's problematic, and that's something that needs to be solved. And so AP leaders have a great opportunity, and what we've seen today is that now a majority of them are getting involved in P2P initiatives. And so this is part of a much larger trend of business collaboration and of technology being thought of in a more holistic way.
Great, thanks. We are actually at the top of the hour, so we are going to cut the Q&A off. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to Andrew or Art, whose email is art.sarno@cofax.com. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.